Hey everybody, welcome back to Kimmell and Cox, your source for all things entertainment. I'm Keith Cox. I'm joined as always by my good friend Dylan Kimmell.
Well, hello everyone.
And today we will be concluding our episode on the Back to the Future trilogy with Back to the Future Part 3.
Part 3?
Yes. Released on May 25th, 1990. Not very far behind Part 2. And we'll get into the reasons behind that in just a little bit. But the final film in the trilogy was, again, written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale and directed by Robert Zemeckis. And starring Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly and Seamus McFly, which is Marty's great-great-grandfather. Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown. Mary Steenburgen as Clara Clayton, have a new character there in this movie. Tom Wilson as Buford Mad Dog Tannen, as well as Biff Tannen. Leah Thompson as Maggie McFly and Lorraine McFly. And Elizabeth Shue is back briefly as Marty's girlfriend, Jennifer Parker. And then we have a few other returning cast members as well, like James Tolkien, except this time he's playing Marshall Strickland instead of Principal Strickland. And you also have Mark McClure and Wendy Jo Sperber back for the first time since the first movie as Marty's brother and sister, Dave and Linda. We didn't really mention them in the first when we talked about the first film. But
it's funny because you kind of forget that he has siblings, anyways.
Yeah, because they weren't in very many scenes. Like in the first movie, they were just in kind of like the first part and the end of the movie. And but the thing is they're good characters. Both of them are good characters. And Mark McClure also. Some of you may recognize him from another really famous movie franchise, Superman, because he played Jimmy Olsen in the Christopher Reeve Superman franchise. Yeah.
I honestly did not put the two together, but now that you've said that, I'm like, oh.
Yeah. But yeah, it's we definitely shouldn't have forgotten them. They are a part of the movie. They're not. They are significant. To the story. They're not just throwaway characters. But anyway, they do make a little appearance in this as well. So Part 3. There's a very good reason why Part 3 was released in such close proximity to Part 2. Because if you remember, Part 2 was released in November of 1989. So we're talking about 6 months, in between each movie. Mm-hmm. Well, they filmed parts 2 and 3 back to back. It was like over an 11-month period that they shot both movies with only like a 3-week break in between filming on each. So that's pretty intense.
Yeah, filming movies back to back. Now that is a very stressful thing. That means a bigger schedule. You're probably filming for longer, and unprecedented. It can be unprecedented, anyways.
Yeah.
I'm not for sure if Back to the Future was the first one to do that. I'm pretty sure there was a couple of others. Actually, if I think back to Superman, I think they filmed some of Superman 2 together.
Yes,
yeah,
because originally.
Originally, Richard Donner was supposed to direct Superman 2.
Yes, and so he had decided to film both movies back to back, and then of course they fired him, brought in Richard Lester to finish the movie. He reshot some scenes, but most of Richard Donner's version survived, which eventually later on they did release the Richard Donner cut.
Much better cut, honestly.
Yes, it is. So it wasn't the first. Movie to do that, but one of the first. There weren't, like I said, there weren't many before that did that.
Yeah, and then afterwards you get one that did 3 at the same time, Lord of the Rings.
Right, and some of those make sense, and I think Harry Potter did that a lot too, because especially if you're starting with younger actors, like if they're kids when you start out. you can't let them like age too much if they're supposed to be within relatively the same time frame. It's like you don't want them to start going through puberty and everything when they're supposed to be
that actually
kids.
Reminds me of something that was brought to my attention about. Now this is off topic, but it's relevant in the fact that we're talking about age difference. Aged up actors or whatever. James Cameron he's working on the Avatar sequels, right? He's making several more Avatar sequels,
right?
And he has kids involved in them. So what he did is he filmed all the scenes with the kids as they were then. All those scenes were filmed for future movies and everything like that, so that he gets them at the right age for that scene and everything. There's no continuity errors or whatever with aged up actors or whatever, and he doesn't have to do the de-aging because sometimes that's really
it just
weird.
kind of unless it's done really well,
it's really weird.
It kind of cheapens the look of the film, I think. But
It Chapter 2, they de-aged the kids in there because they are now grown up and everything.
Right. So sometimes there can be a little there's a lot of activity going on out there.
Wow.
But so it's with a movie like that, it's interesting because obviously the director had intentions of making more movies, so he could do that. He could go ahead and film those scenes and then save them for a future sequel. In this case, of course, as we know, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale had no intentions of making a sequel to Back to the Future. So if I recall, I think when they wrote the sequel, I think that the events of Part 2 and Part 3 were originally one script. It was going to be one movie. So they were literally going to go from 1985 to 2015, back to alternate 1985, and then to 1955, and finally to 1885, all in the same movie. But it became apparent to them that obviously this movie was going to be way too long, and it was going to be impossible to it was going to be too much to fit into one movie. So then they decided to split it into two, and I think that's why they filmed them back to back, because they originally had intentions of doing it all as one film. They're like, nope, let's split it. Let's take a break in between, take a few weeks off, and then go back and film the rest of it. And I think it worked out much better that way, splitting it into, because now it made it into a trilogy, and it really stands up perfectly as a trilogy. I think as we'll find out here, I think they wrap things up pretty nicely, and I think they conclude the trilogy very well. A lot of people have mixed feelings about the third movie. I know some people that say they think it's the worst in the trilogy. They can't stand it for whatever reason. I like Part 3 myself. There's a lot of things I like about it. It for one thing, it kind of gets away from the special effects aspect of the movies a little bit. Not that the special effects weren't great, because they were all, they were revolutionary for their time, but it was nice to sort of get away from that a little bit. And so there's a little bit, it's a little bit more focused on story and a practical just action sequences and things like that. It's a Western pretty much. And I like Westerns. I like that style of movie.
I believe it's every actor's dream to be in a Western.
Yeah. And I think the cast really enjoyed it too. They they taught them all how to ride horses, and I think they taught Tom Wilson how to how to rope, how to swing a lasso.
You can tell that everyone's having fun with this one.
Yeah.
I think they're having more fun with this one than they were even the second one, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
You can definitely tell it on Tom Wilson's face. He's really enjoying that role, even though he's still playing a dick.
Yeah.
He's
I think, and I could be wrong about this, but I think a lot of the actors who worked in the movies, I think the majority of them cited the third one as their favorite. I could
think
be
even
wrong
Michael
about
J.
that.
Fox has
But-
said that too.
Yeah.
I think I seem to recall him saying that he really wanted to be in a Western for a long time,
Yeah.
and then he got to do that with that one. So he
Yeah.
had a lot of fun with that. Well, with the exception of getting hung in that one scene.
Yeah. And actually, I believe he mentions this in his first book. He's written 3 memoirs now, and in his first one called Lucky Man, I seem to recall that he mentioned, because it wasn't long after that, it was about a year after that he started showing signs of Parkinson's disease. It started with a little tremor in his pinky finger, was how he noticed it. It just wouldn't stop shaking. He was like in his hotel room or something one night and noticed it. But I think he mentioned in that book, and again I could be wrong because I haven't read it in a while, but I think he mentioned that scene where Buford Tannen tries to hang Marty. When you do a hanging scene in a movie, you're supposed to rig up the noose in a way that you're supposed to leave just enough space for you to be able to squeeze your arm your hand in between the rope and your neck, so that it's not, legitimately like cutting off your circulation, your oxygen. But I believe he speculated that because the first time they did like two cuts of that scene. For 2 takes, I mean. The first take, I guess something, went wrong, and so when they shot the second take, there was something wrong with the noose or whatever, and so it was actually like choking him legitimately, and it was, it was already starting to cut off the oxygen supply to his brain, before they yelled cut, figured out what was going on. And I think he speculated that because he was up there for longer than he should have been, choking, that obviously
that
Parkinson's disease
contributed to it.
Is a neurological disease, and that could have been the thing that triggered the Parkinson's. We don't know, but
it's hard to say.
Yeah. But interesting, to think that could have very easily, his battle with Parkinson's could have been started, with that little mishap. But who really knows? But no, it's to me it's just a fun movie. I think it's really enjoyable to watch, and they kind of poke fun at the Western genre a little bit because. In the beginning, Doc dresses Marty in this really outlandish.
Oh yeah, he dresses him up in this little getup that's like it's an awful looking thing. He's like, I don't know, Doc, this doesn't look right.
Yeah, he's like Clint Eastwood would never wear anything like this, and he's
Clint
like,
who?
It's like, oh, that's right, you haven't heard of him yet. And the thing was Clint Eastwood was only just starting to. Become known. I think the TV series Rawhide, which is what really brought him into the public eye. I want to say I think that did come out in 1955, but maybe it was a little bit later in 55 or something. So, but it was just funny because westerns that were made, up to that time, and in like the 1940s and 50s, and they were not authentic. It's like they wore these the cowboys. That's what Hollywood thought a cowboy was supposed to look like, and they would wear these really bright colored outfits with a lot of fringe and big shiny belt buckles and it was totally like it was just a costuming thing, but they weren't going for, I guess, authenticity. And so that was the joke there, was that because that's what he'd seen on TV. Doc thought of course this is authentic. This is what cowboys wore back then. But then of course once Marty goes back to 1885, then they go for more of the traditional, the authentic Western look.
The funny thing is that he throws away the boots when he travels. He's like, right. Oh,
He's still wearing his Nikes, you know, even though Doc warned him, you know, it's like Marty, you can't wear those futuristic things, you know, in 1885. You shouldn't even be wearing them here in 1955. And he's like, don't worry, Doc, I'll put them on as soon as I get there. And
he doesn't even get the chance.
He doesn't get the chance to.
And honestly, even it didn't matter what Doc said because the way he dresses him in is still not right either.
Right.
But going back, the scene that prompts them to send him back to the future, to the Wild West, of course, as we mentioned, was Doc was transported.
In part 2, yeah. He was accidentally transported to 1885 because lightning struck the DeLorean.
And he actually says in the letter, he says, do not come back for me.
Yeah, he didn't want Marty to come back. He was perfectly happy. You know, he had been, when he wrote Marty the letter, he had already been living in Hill Valley 1885 for like 8 months. So he had set himself up as a blacksmith and you know, he was doing great. He loved it. He loved living in the Old West. So
except 2 days later after he sent that letter, he gets shot in the back.
Yeah, which they discover, you know, when Doc writes Marty the letter, he tells him that he's stored the DeLorean away in an abandoned mine shaft near an old, it's like Boot Hill Cemetery, like an old, you know, Western cemetery. So Marty and the 1955 Doc go and uncover the DeLorean and make some repairs to it and kind of rig up because the time circuits got destroyed in the lightning strike. So Doc had to rig up some new time circuits using materials that he had there in 1955, and basically rigged up this thing on the hood of the DeLorean, and so Doc sends, you know, like, you know, Marty's like, you know, despite Doc's wishes, he's like, you know, I can't leave him, you know, back in, you know, 1885, and so he you know, gets 1955 Doc to help him, you know, send him back to 1885.
Even 1955 Doc is like, I don't want that life. Go ahead and save my butt there.
Right, yeah. And so there's some great stuff there. Like they send Marty back. They go to this old drive-in movie theater, and it's out in Monument Valley in California, which is it was used a lot like back in the day for filming westerns and everything. It has such a great look to it. You have all these big bluffs and cliffs and everything, and the dirt kind of has this like red. It's like a red clay, you know, kind of. And it's a really cool looking place.
I think they film scenes for that when they have like a Mars scene also.
Yeah. It's great for desert scenes and westerns and stuff like that. And so the drive-in, the movie theater screen has this artwork adorning it with all these Indians on horseback.
And it is a funny line that Marty gives. He's like, man, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to drive right into those Indians in there. And Doc's like, oh, those Indians won't be there.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
He's like, you know, he's like Marty. He's like, you're not thinking fourth dimensionally.
Fourth dimensional. Yeah.
He's like, by the time you know, hit that screen, those Indians won't even be there. And, you know, Marty kind of has his doubts or whatever. And then, you know, and then, of course, when he does, like right before he hits the movie screen, he hits 88 miles an hour. And as soon as he passes that point, there are real Indians on horseback charging towards him. And so that was just a hilarious joke there. And so he's running from the Indians. He finds a cave and he hides the DeLorean in the cave. And
the cavalry comes right after the Indians too. And
then he runs into a bear in the cave. Which is what causes him to forget his boots. He was going to put his boots on, but then he throws them over his shoulder to distract the bear, and ends up falling down a hill and running into a fence and knocking himself unconscious, which puts him into the care of what would turn out to be his great-great-grandparents, Seamus and Maggie McFly.
Yeah, so they have these Irish accents and everything, and and I'm not going to attempt to do an Irish accent there.
They were doing the best they could too.
It's not quite.
It's not great.
It's not great. It's probably just like what I did just there. It's not exactly perfect,
but so again, it presents them with an opportunity to repeat a gag that has been in all three movies, where Marty wakes up in bed with either his mom or, in this case, someone who is
his great
ancestor, but she looks like his mom.
Yeah. So she says at this point, she says, "Well, you're all right now. Back on the
McFly farm."
McFly.
It's like McFly farm. Yeah. And he's like, "You're my. Who are you?"
You're my. Who are you?
Yeah, but so again, some they find new ways to do old gags in this movie.
That's what I wanted to say is that the funny thing about this is that even if they're not doing a gag, they will reinterpret things from the previous movies, and it's like that old saying. You know it, right? History repeats itself,
right? And these movies really play on that a lot, and it's this notion that certain events keep cycling throughout history in slightly different ways.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm jumping forward here. I just before I forget it, I gotta mention it. The scene where he builds the model. The model, yeah. Yes. He even says it again. He's like, I didn't have time to paint it or put it up to scale, or please excuse
the crudity of this model. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff. Actually, I think it was Marty actually that said at that time. He said
he interrupts him right after.
He interrupts him. Yeah. He's like, I know, Doc. It's not built to scale. It's okay. So it's like he knows Doc so well that he knows exactly what what he's thinking, what he's going to say. But Doc's been busy, since he's been, in the Old West. He's a blacksmith. He's been inventing things. He actually, invents a very early refrigerator. Yeah. It's like this just giant, contraption that takes up like half the room. And, he's like turning all these like wheels and stuff, and like whistles are going off, and he's like, quick, Marty, turn that handle or whatever. And so he goes through this whole business, and then it just spits out one little ice cube, and he's puts it in his glass, and he's like, iced tea, and then Marty realizes like it's a refrigerator, So he can't resist inventing things even when he's in 1885.
Now here's the funny thing. And here's the funny thing. I realize I say this. Here's the funny thing a lot. Or here's the interesting thing. Mm-hmm. I guess that's my catchphrase. But here's the funny thing. So he's on to Marty about, causing implications to the future and everything. He builds a refrigerator.
Yeah. And
you see where I'm going with
he's
that.
Doing all this. Because that's sort of the whole, the main theme or whatever, the plot of this movie is that ultimately, Doc spent all this time trying to warn Marty against, doing things that could, that could change the space-time continuum and affect your future and everything. But Doc is doing, throughout this movie, he's doing exactly that. He's following his heart instead of, following his logical mind. He even invents a rifle, or invents a scope, like a high-powered scope, which didn't exist in those days, and now it's commonplace. You can get these, scopes that magnify your vision, so you can hit targets from much farther away. So he was doing things back then already that wouldn't become commonplace until the next couple of centuries, but. So Marty, obviously goes back to 1885 to rescue Doc. They run into all kinds of problems. He runs into Buford Tannen, nicknamed Mad Dog, because
Mad Dog.
Yeah, it's like, I hate that name. You hear? I hate it. Nobody calls me Mad Dog, especially not some duded up, egg-sucking gutter trash.
That's the thing I love there. He when he runs into Buford Tannen, Buford Tannen says, he mistakes him for
Seamus. Yeah, because Seamus had given Marty one of his hats. It's like a derby style hat.
Yeah, it's a very goofy looking hat.
He's like, "Hey, McFly," and Marty turns around. He's like, "I thought I told you never to come in here." "Hey, you ain't Seamus, McFly. You look like him though, especially with that dog ugly hat."
Now, what's the thing with the Buford? The Tannens always bullying McFlies.
I don't know. Again, it's like it's like a generational curse or whatever you want to call it. But it's that whole history repeating itself. It's like they've just had this rivalry between Tannens and McFlies for generations. Mm-hmm. But he has some really good. Tom Wilson has some really great stuff in this movie.
I really love him in this one. Now he calls him dude.
He says dude a lot.
Now, dude
and runt.
Yeah, dude and runt. Dude is the one that I'm kind of hooked on though, because that kind of throws me out. But I think it's supposed to anyway. I don't know if they've actually said dude in the Old West. Did they actually say dude in the Old West?
I don't know. I think it does. I think that term does actually go back that far.
Really?
We think of dude as being more
like
associated with a surfer
like
type lingo,
80s.
But I think it actually did because you've heard of like dude ranches and stuff like that. I think it was a cowboy term. It's like a dude was sort of like a euphemism for a stranger. Somebody that was new in town. It's like that.
I guess it's one of those words where it meant something different than it does today.
Yeah.
Kind of like there's a deleted scene in the first Back to the Future where now this might be a controversial deleted scene. I think you know which scene I'm talking about, where Marty's like, "What if I end up being?" Talking to Doc, he's like, "What if I end up being gay?" And then, have you seen?
Oh, right, yeah. I totally forgotten about that deleted scene.
Doc Brown, he's like, "And why shouldn't you be happy?"
Right. Yeah, I do. I remember that. Yeah, it's like, and you can look back on it now, and you can understand why they, left that out. I mean, even though back then it wasn't, they weren't nearly as concerned with political correctness as they are nowadays.
Yeah,
but I think it was a wise choice. I think that would have changed the tone and the dynamic of the movie a little bit.
Yeah, because Marty generally that kind of seems kind of mean spirited in a way, especially nowadays, saying that kind of line. But anyways, back to part 3. Yeah.
So in the midst of Marty, trying to rescue Doc, they because at the beginning of the movie, after they uncover the DeLorean in the cemetery, they discover a headstone with Doc's name on it and showing that he was shot by Buford Tannen, and over a matter of just $80, and that this woman named Clara Clayton, I guess, had paid for Doc's headstone and everything, and and they're like, who, Marty's like who the hell is Clara, so they're trying to figure this out, like, where, who is this woman and why was she involved in Doc's life, and not long after that, they learn that Clara Clayton is a new school teacher coming into town. Mm-hmm. To teach school, at Hill Valley, I guess, high school or whatever.
The funny thing is that Doc, he says, "I don't have time." Like, this is before they meet Claire, and Doc is like, "Oh, I don't have time for love or anything." Right. A guy like me, no.
Yeah, he's like more or less like, I'm a scientist. Like, the idea of me getting involved in such a relationship, in this time period, it's just ridiculous. And then the next thing you know, here comes the mayor announcing her arrival. Mm-hmm. And they happen onto her by accident. It's her a snake. She's
A snake startles one of her horses while she's on a carriage.
Yeah, and she's she's out of control or whatever. Doc and Marty see her and go running after her, and Doc rescues her, and her buckboard goes off the cliff and crashes into a million pieces. And then, of course, he learns her name, and they realize, holy crap, like, we may have just seriously altered history here. She was supposed to go over that cliff and die because they were supposed to name the ravine.
The ravine after her, yeah.
It was they were looking at a map, and they're like, when they were later on, when they're plotting how they're going to get Marty back to 1985. And they're looking at a map, and he's like, it's like, oh, this is curious. It's like this. It's like, on this map, it's called Shonash Ravine. It was supposed to be Clayton Ravine. He's like, this must be the old Indian name for it. And then later on, it dawns on them that, oh, that was supposed to be her. And so it sets off this whole thing of did they just completely ruin history by saving her life.
Like Doc Brown's all distraught. He's like, I have ruined the timeline. I have done it.
But he falls in love with her. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that I liked about this movie compared to the others, is that it gives Doc even more to do, and we see a different side of him. Mm-hmm. He's really, if you think about it, his personality is a little bit different in this movie compared to the other two. I feel like he's more
he's more human.
Yeah, he's more human. He's more confident, in the sense that he has a different, I don't know, he has a different swagger about him. He has a different air about him.
He finds someone that connects with him on a personal level, that understands him on that level. Like, they both fall in love with each other, and they love Jules Verne.
Mm-hmm. They love science fiction and just science in general, astrology, all those things. And so he really connects with her, and at first he decides that he wants to stay in 1885 to be with her, and Marty convinces him that it's like, Doc, you're a scientist, it's like, more or less, you have to, you need to think with your head and not with your heart, like, what's the right thing to do up here. And eventually Doc agrees, and he's like, you're right, I can't take a chance on, I've already potentially seriously affected the space-time continuum. I can't afford to do that anymore. So he, breaks things off, with Claire, and of course she's devastated.
He tells her the truth too.
Yeah, he does. She basically begs him. She's like, don't treat me like a child. Just tell me the truth. And he tells her, I came here from the year 1985. I invented a time machine, all this kind of stuff. And then she feels like he's just making excuses at that point because it sounds so ridiculous. She's like, you could have just told me that you didn't love me and didn't want to see me anymore. That would have been better than giving me this, this huge story. And he's like, but that's the truth.
But that's not true.
Yeah. But another big part of the story here is trying to figure out how they're going to get Marty back to 1985. Because when Marty was running from the Indians, one of them hits the DeLorean with an arrow and
hits
rips
the gas line.
The fuel line.
The fuel line. Yeah.
And, of course, Marty's not thinking what time period he's in. He's like, oh, we can just pour some gas in there, and we'll, or no, he forgets about the gas aspect because he thinks that, that the DeLorean, runs on, because Doc, in part two, it had come up with that Mr. Fusion idea, which was supposed to replace the plutonium. Yeah. And then Doc explains to him that, well, Mr. Fusion powers the time circuits and the flux capacitor, but the internal combustion engine, has always run on gasoline, always will. And this is 1885. You can't get gasoline. And so they have to figure out how in the world are they going to, to get the, they have to be able to get the DeLorean up to 88 miles per hour. And so they try pulling it with horses. They hook up 6 horses to it, and it only gets up to about
maybe
40 miles an hour or something like that. And then he's like, well, maybe we can roll it down a steep hill. And he's like, no, you'd never get a steep enough surface. It's like, oh, I have it. We'll wait till winter. when the lake freezes over, and then Marty's like, Doc, you're gonna get shot on Monday. You know, he's like, okay, let's just think about this logically. He's like, if we know it won't. They even tried pouring some whiskey in the gas tank, and the gas tank or the whiskey was so strong that it actually blew the fuel injection manifold. And so he's like, all right, so we know the DeLorean won't run under its own power. We know we can't pull it, but what if we could push it up to 88 miles per hour?
And right just at that as moment, he says that, the
train comes into the station in the background. So they get the idea. Okay, they have this elaborate plan where they're going to hijack.
Yeah, talk to the train,
the next train that comes in, and unhook all the cars from it. And there's a straight stretch of track. They have to use the switch track, and because when they talked to one of the engineers, they were asking like, what's the fastest you've ever gotten a train up to, and he tells them, and then it's like, have you ever gotten, you think one could do like maybe 90, and he's like 90. It's like, what in tarnation would you ever be in such a hurry for? But then he explains to him, he's like, well, if you had a straight stretch of track, with a level grade, and you could get the fire hot enough, then maybe you can reach speeds like that. So then Doc comes up with this idea. He invents these, basically his version of Presto logs.
Yeah.
And each one, there's like 3 of them, and each one burns at a different temperature, and it basically just it kicks up the boiler pressure, and will cause the locomotive to run faster.
Right.
And so that's the plan. It's like they're going to push he outfits the DeLorean with like rail car wheels. It's like we're gonna push it, and of course there's a point where the bridge
isn't finished.
The bridge is not finished, and of course Marty's like, well, this is not going to work. He's like, I'm going to go plummet right off the edge of the track into the ravine, and of course Doc reminds him again. It's like
Marty,
you're not thinking fourth
dimensionally.
And he's like by the time, so if you hit 88,
I get that a lot.
Yeah, it's like if you hit 88 miles an hour before you hit the edge of the ravine, when you get to 1985, you'll go safely across the finished bridge.
Yeah.
So so that's the main part of the story, but obviously, as always in any Back to the Future movie, there are things that interfere with that, and they end up cutting it really close.
Like the big spot there, because obviously Marty has interfered with the part that Doc Brown might get shot, and it's actually shown that, like, he brought a little picture of the
tombstone.
The tombstone. And Doc Brown's name vanishes. It's now empty. But it's not, like, he's like, oh, the future's changing. He's like, but the tombstone is still there, meaning it may not be my name.
Mm-hmm.
And so Marty's hot-headedness might have earned him the spot.
Yep.
The whole chicken line.
Yep, the whole thing about people thinking of him as a coward really kind of gets him into trouble in these movies. And he has a run-in with Buford Tannen, so now Buford Tannen's kind of like, he's kind of forgotten all about Doc.
And there's another moral thing there, where Seamus actually tells him, he's like, you can't let people get under your skin, and just go with it. Because
Seamus's brother got stabbed in a saloon for that exact reason, because people were always trying to provoke him into fights, and he didn't want to be thought of as coward. And so Buford talks Marty into meeting him outside the saloon on the day that Doc and Marty are supposed to go back to the future. And it's classic showdown that you see in westerns so much.
Marty, of course, thinking that they're going to be gone by then, not going to ditch him and everything.
Yeah, he's like he tells him, he's like what are we going to meet at high noon? And and Buford's like I do my killing before breakfast, 7 o'clock. And Marty's like, 8 o'clock. I do my killing after breakfast. And Doc is like, what are you doing, Marty? You know, he's like, are you forgetting? And he's like, Doc, he's like, we're gonna be long gone by 8 o'clock. And he's like, yeah, in theory. He's like, what if the train is late? You know? And so then Marty has this realization, like, well, wait a minute, we didn't talk about this. And but you know, in true Back to the Future fashion, there's all these things that happen like right at the climax of the movie and making you wonder, is Marty going to make it back? Because Doc,
yeah, he even says in there, he says, why do we have to cut it so close?
Yeah, like Doc, after
breaking up with
Clara, goes to the saloon, and after only taking one shot of whiskey, he passes out.
Yeah, just one shot. That man can't hold his liquor.
Yeah, they're trying to wake They're trying to wake him up, and then Buford shows up early to the saloon. It's like before 8 o'clock, and calls him out, and you know, Marty comes up with this brilliant idea, which he stole from a Clint Eastwood movie. And that's the thing too, I meant to mention in this movie.
Part two, they set up a whole bunch of things. Like one, Back to the Future, when they went to 2015, there was this part where they actually show that Marty McFly has a good shot because he plays that game.
Right, he plays the arcade game.
The arcade game, and that comes into full circle, and that's how he ends up getting the gun in the Wild West.
Biff is watching.
He's watching one of the old Clint Eastwood movies.
It's part of that trilogy of the Man with No Name movies. It might be The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I can't remember which one he's watching, but but he's watching that in the hot tub, and so that is sort of foreshadowing because Marty takes the idea from that movie where he finds takes a door off of one of those old like potbelly stoves and puts it under his like what do you call it? It's like a serape, like a wrap.
Yeah, you know, like a little poncho thing. Yeah.
And you know, he meets Tannen in the streets, and you know, they're supposed to have a shootout. But Marty takes his gun off, and tells Beaver, he's like, I thought we could settle this like men. And he's like, you thought wrong, dude. And then he shoots him like right in the chest. Of course, Marty goes down. Biff or Mad Dog goes over there. It's like a little inspect his work, and then Marty kicks the gun out of his hand, jumps up, and you know, Mad Dog goes to punch him, and hits the and then Marty lifts up his poncho there and reveals the stove door underneath, and it's basically like a makeshift bulletproof vest.
And then he smacks him in the head,
and then punches him a few times, knocks him into
a tombstone, and then the tombstone's gone, and then he lands into a big pile of shit.
Yep. That's where tannins are always meant to end up, apparently. It's in a big pile of shit. You know, and then he repeats that line. It's like I hate manure. And
Officer Strickland,
Marshall Strickland.
Strickland comes up, and then the gang,
get him out of that shit.
And then Buford's gang is like, I think he's going to jail. And they run out.
Yeah. And then Clara overhears a conversation on, you know, she's bought a one-way ticket to California. She's wanting to get as far away from Hill Valley as San Francisco is what it was, because Hill Valley's already in California. But she wants to get as far away from Hill Valley as possible after what happened with Doc. But then she overhears a conversation from another guy on the train who was in the saloon with Doc, and realizes how much he was, you know, in love with her. So she goes running after him. You know, finds the empty blacksmith shop and finds the little model of the DeLorean that says Time Machine on it. And then she realizes, oh, he really was telling the truth. and she goes to try to catch the train. Marty and Doc are already like well on their way towards going back to 1985, and
that is a little bit of a funny scene. Like
it is
like the train, like they put those logs in
there,
and
it starts going faster and faster.
She's getting knocked over all the way, and she just says,
really has
golly.
That's all she says. It was like, golly. It's like, nowadays it would be something completely different that would probably come out of her mouth. But yeah, so, big ending there. It's like there's so much going on. It's like, Clara jumps on board the train, and Doc, decides that he's going to take her, with them, but she barely makes it out. I mean, she almost dies in the process. Nearly, falls off the train, and
Marty throws the hoverboard over to Doc.
Saves him.
Ends up getting on the hoverboard and saves both of them,
and then Marty
just drift off and
successfully, reaches 88 miles an hour and goes back into the future, and the locomotive careens off into the ravine in a big explosion. And cool thing about that was
they didn't
look great.
It looked amazing, and I'd say that's probably just models, isn't it?
It was most of that was done with at least for the crash and stuff like that was done with miniatures, but it looks so good because when I was a kid, when I saw that, I thought that they really
threw a
real locomotive. I'm like, that's pretty awesome. I didn't find out until years later when I watched a documentary that was a miniature. It was still a big, when you think miniature, we're not talking like Hot Wheel size. I mean, it was probably, I don't know,
like that big. Maybe.
It was probably about, I don't know, maybe it was probably about 3 or 4 feet.
Oh, 3 or 4 feet.
Yeah, I mean, it was big. I mean, it was really big, which makes sense because that's probably, and when you film it, in slow motion and everything, and with the rigging up the explosives and all that, that scale I think really made it look more like a real train. So
Marty's goes back into the future, and it's he's on a train tracks. You see that now. I didn't think of it this first. I think it was meant to be like a funny at first moment because the rails or whatever that
the gates
end up closing,
come down, and
as he's rolling down. And at first, my brain's like, "Oh, that's funny." It registered that he was on the
right. No. Then another train starts coming right towards him. And he barely makes it out of the DeLorean in time before it just crashes right into the DeLorean, and it just explodes in like millions of pieces. And so sadly, Doc kind of gets his wish because he has a line in the movie, about wanting to destroy the time machine. He says, I wish I'd never invented that infernal machine. It's caused nothing but disaster. And so they do succeed in destroying the DeLorean. So no more time travel adventures for Doc or Marty, or so we think. Marty goes and picks up his girlfriend Jennifer, who's still asleep on her porch where they left her in part 2. Wakes her up, takes her for a ride in his new truck, that he got in the first movie.
And Needles pulls up again.
Needles shows up and challenges him to a drag race, which is supposed to be the drag race that Marty injures himself in, and basically kind of ruins his career, ruins his life or whatever, because he let somebody talk him into racing, and he crashed into a Rolls Royce.
But his time in the Wild West and everything like that, learning from his mistakes of letting people get to him and everything, he's like.
Yep,
he fakes it and starts driving backwards.
Yeah, he drives backwards, and Needles and his gang,
nearly hit
Rolls Royce, and then Marty realized, he's like, holy shit! It's like if I would have raced him, I would have hit that Rolls Royce, and then, he takes Jennifer takes out the fax
that says you're fired on it, and it disappears.
So Marty has changed his life for the better just by that one, wise decision. And I think that's really kind of the moral of the movies.
They go back to the train tracks, and he shows her that it wasn't a dream or anything like that. It really did happen. And then all of a sudden, something weird happens.
Yeah, the gates on the railroad track, at the railroad crossing, start coming down again, and Marty and Jennifer are they look one way down the track, they look the other way, and there's no train
coming. What?
And then all of a
this?
sudden, this big flash of light, knocks them on their butts, and we see a
very weird,
very odd-looking train. That we discover is a new time machine that Doc built while he's been living. At this point, he's been living back in 1885, or in the Old West at least, for many years, and comes back at that point in time to visit Marty. And he's been a little busy. Doc's been a little busy. He and Clara have two kids, two little boys, Jules and Vern. and he, Marty and Doc took a little souvenir photo while they were in 1885, because they were just constructing a clock tower, and so they had a picture taken in front of the clock. But part of it got destroyed when the DeLorean got destroyed. And so Doc, I'm getting Marty and Doc, I'm combining them into one name. Doc presents Marty with a framed photo, of the two of them, and
then Jennifer asks him about the little piece of paper.
She's like, "What does this mean? It's erased." And he's like, "Of course it's erased." He's like, "The future hasn't been written yet. No one has. It's your future is whatever you make of it. So make it a good one." And then with that, he closes up the train, which then the wheels fold down on
steam. By the way,
it's powered by steam, and it the wheels fold down, and it raises off the tracks and flies off into the sunset, so to speak. But this time it's not a joke. There's no more sequels.
The end.
The end. Not to be continued. Not to be concluded. So we know at that point that there were no plans for any further Back to the Future movies. But
however, there's been more adventures since then. Probably not canon in particular, but just fun little.
Actually, the most of them, I guess, are
I guess you
considered canon.
I guess you could, yeah.
So in the time since
other forms of media,
right? So after Part 3, actually not very long after Part 3, there have been the Back to the Future legacy did continue because we got Universal Studios Florida on May 2nd, 1991, opened Back to the Future the ride.
Man, I wish I could have ridden that. It's no longer there anymore.
It was so awesome. It closed on March 30th of 2007. Man. So it was in there for a long time, but it was replaced by the Simpsons ride. That's what's there now.
I mean, I like the Simpsons and everything, but yeah. I feel like
it was such a loss, and it was and especially for its time, it was so cool. It was a virtual reality ride. So the whole premise of the ride, it was kind of a mission-based sort of thing. Doc was now working for this Institute of Future Technology. He had built, as an experiment, an 8-passenger DeLorean, so that more people could potentially time travel. And so you, as the rider, were supposed to be time travel volunteers. You had volunteered for his experiment to send this new DeLorean into a specified place and time, and all of this is explained on videos that are being played throughout while you're waiting in line.
Yeah.
And you can look this up. It's on YouTube. You can actually watch the entire Back to the Future the ride experience. It has all of the pre-show like videos, and it shows the ride itself. And so basically, Biff comes along. Biff has time traveled from the year 1955.
Now, is Biff actually played by Tom Wilson?
Yes, Tom Wilson and Christopher Lloyd are both
they've returned
in these videos. Cool. And so he comes to the Institute, steals the real DeLorean, the original DeLorean. And so now the people who are there to ride the attraction have the mission. Doc gives them the mission that they have to go after Biff and chase him down, and they have to bump the other DeLorean, because apparently if there's this thing where apparently if two time travel vehicles bump each other, it sends them back into the time that they came from or something. There was some kind of little contrived thing. And so that's basically what you're doing is the ride is you're chasing after Biff, and you're going through all these different time periods. You go into even into like the Ice Age and stuff like that. There's dinosaurs. You nearly fly into a T-Rex's mouth. And
that would have been so much fun. Yeah. I hate that I missed out on that.
And they had the DeLorean, the 8-passenger DeLorean. They had it up on this hydraulic arm. And so it would raise off the ground, and it could tilt and go up and down and everything. And so that combined with the gigantic sort of IMAX style 3D screen in front of you really made it feel like you were flying. I mean, it was just really cool for its time, and it definitely was one of the best rides that they ever had at Universal Studios. So you had that kind of continuing on the legacy, and outside the ride, they actually had one of the original DeLorean time machines from the movie.
I did see that. I do remember seeing videos of that up there.
And they had the train. They had the time machine.
They did
train
have the train
was there.
too. Oh my!
And I still have pictures of that somewhere. I got pictures taken with that, because obviously there was only one of those. One, and I guess a miniature for that shot at the end. So that was really cool. And for the opening of the ride, Michael J. Fox, Tom Wilson, and Mary Steenburgen were there for the grand opening. And
that
then
really cool to see.
Later, so the other Universal Studios theme parks followed suit and opened their own Back to the Future ride. The one in Hollywood was open from June 12th, 1993 to September 3rd, 2007. So it closed roughly around the same time as the one in Florida. And then oddly enough, the one at Universal Studios Japan did not open until March 31st of 2001. Quite a ways after the...
Is that still...
That one closed down on May 31st of 2016.
Man,
so it hasn't been gone for too long. Yeah, but it was odd that they didn't even... I guess Japan was kind of behind the... behind the game on stuff like that, and but the fact that it didn't even open until so long after I
was wanting to see it. Is it still there?
Yeah, I
might have to go.
But
better luck next time.
But again,
if you had a time traveling DeLorean, you might be able to see it. But
but if you can still you can catch videos of the ride and everything to see what it was like, and then also September 14th. 1991 saw the premiere of Back to the Future, the animated series.
I remember watching at least the reruns, because I didn't have cable or anything like that. I mean, it was on Saturday Night TV.
Yeah, Saturday morning cartoons. Yeah, and and it was pretty good. It
had Christopher Lloyd was introducing the episode in each.
Yep, he did the intros and the outros.
The one that really stuck, for some reason, it was the funniest one to me when I was little, growing up, is the one where he gets a letter from his future self, and he reads the letter. He says, "I've got a letter. What does it say?" And he starts reading. He's like, "Look out for bag. Bag? What bag?" And that bag just falls right onto his head.
Yeah, it was a good little show. I enjoyed those live action segments at the beginning and the end of every show.
Beef.
Beef tannin.
Beef tannin. Oh, shit. Biff looked really weird in that one, honestly. He looked like a cartoon bully would look like. He didn't actually look like Tom Wilson, I didn't think.
But Tom Wilson and Mary Steenburgen both reprised their roles, and then also voiced other characters like ancestors of their characters on the show. So you did have some original, returning cast members for the series.
It's kind of funny that Christopher Lloyd, although he did the intros, he didn't do
his voice for Doc. Yeah,
I mean, he's got history of doing voice acting too.
So I'm not sure what the reasoning was behind that, but it was a pretty cool little show, and it only ran for 2 seasons. It's the last broadcast was on December 26, 1992. And there was also, I believe, it kind of tied in with, there was a comic series, I think, that
there was a comic book
based
series,
on that.
Yeah. And there's they've also done a few more comic book series recently.
Mm-hmm.
But there
was also the game,
the video
Back to the
game,
Future, the game. Yes,
the DeLorean. Now this was actually Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis did have a hand in writing that material. The DeLorean mysteriously reappears,
right,
and Marty tries to figure this all out and why this is here. And interesting enough, Tom Wilson did not reprise the role of Biff in that until 2015 when they did the anniversary version.
The original version of the game was divided into 5 separate episodes that were all released on different dates. The first one was released on December 22nd, 2010, and the last one was June 23rd of 2011.
I was looking for it, honestly. I just found the anniversary edition on Amazon for Xbox. I'm like, I got an Xbox. Should I get it? Should I get it? I don't know. I mean, you can't actually get it digitally or anything like that because they've removed it from all digital servers and everything like that. Yeah. So it's a very hard game to find now.
It's
anything Back to the Future, it seems.
It's an okay game. It has more of a
it has a focus more
cartoony look to it, as they're not going for like realism.
No, it has more of a. It's more so focused on Christopher Lloyd's Emmett Brown. Like Marty you start learning more about his past and everything like that, and they did get a very good sound-alike for Marty McFly.
Yes,
honestly.
yeah, he was great. He was like really spot on. They kind of recreated some of the classic scenes, from the movie, especially from the first movie, and he just nailed it. But it's kind of one of those mission-based games where basically it's like you
point and click and
make a choice. It's like you go into a room and it's like you got to choose, between like 3 options, and depending on which option you choose, the gameplay changes and the cut scenes change, depending on the choice that they make.
I want them to make a game where, similar to how the Ghostbusters video game really made you feel like a Ghostbuster, right? The original one. Well, I say original. There were a few
the
before
2009.
That, I say original, but it is original because when it has the original people, I think that's original. Yeah. I want to see a game where they actually implement time travel in a way. Actually have an impact on the time traveling thing. That way people can have their little fixation on, time traveling. I want it to probably be very expensive a game, honestly, to time travel to this time period or that time period or this time period,
Right.
And then go back. You have your option to go back to the future or, so, and obviously you'd have choices that impact what happens here, what happens there. No, they could do it. They could implement some of the stuff that they have with certain games. They could do it with. There's this game called. Shoot, I'm forgetting the name of it now. But there's these certain games where they have pre-programmed stuff, but it's like randomized. So they could, use something with that and the choices that you implement in there. There's certain games that have that random factor in there, so you could use something like that to actually fixate, the time traveling aspect of it. I'm just brainstorming here. So,
there's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot more they could do with that for sure. I think I think they could. Like I said, it was an okay game, but I think they could definitely come up with something even better.
Yeah.
And Michael J. Fox actually, he wasn't voicing Marty. He was voicing a different character.
Yeah, just the little cameos and everything.
Yeah, in the 2015, when they did that re-release. On October 13th, 2015, which was to commemorate the 30th anniversary of Back to the Future.
I'm going to have to get that.
Yeah, but he and Tom Wilson both did voices for the anniversary edition.
I mean, like you said, it's an okay game, but I just want to hear their voices.
Yeah.
Because if you go on YouTube and you watch the gameplay, it's the original actors. Like, no one's recorded anything with Tom Wilson's Biff or anything like that. I want to see the anniversary edition, and no one's actually recorded that. And
the latest incarnation, or whatever you want to call it, for Back to the Future is Back to the Future the musical.
The musical.
Yes.
Oh yes, I forgot entirely about that.
Yeah. So Back to the Future lives on the stage. It first premiered in Manchester, England, on February 20th of 2020, and ran there for a while, and I think there was another place over in that overseas there in 2021 where they had several shows, but it's supposed to be coming to Broadway in June of this year. So they're bringing it to America. It's like I said, it premiered in England, but I think some of the cast has changed for the American version. But anyway, Back to the Future and its legacy still lives on today, and just in different forms.
Might have to go see that. We might have to do a special episode where Kimmell and Cox go and visit that musical.
That would be cool. We never know. We might have to just make a trip to New York or something for that. But yeah. So these films, all three films, are such a huge part of just American cinema, and can't recommend them enough. So definitely. Go and check them out, and I just recommend getting your hands on anything Back to the Future that you can watch. They're just such great movies.
Yeah.
I know you can stream all three of them on Peacock, Amazon Prime, several other places, and they're also available on DVD and Blu-ray. So plenty of places where you can catch those movies, and And I think for those who haven't seen them, I think you will fall in love with them just as quickly as we did.
Yes.
But that's just about all the time we've got for today. But
all the time. Well,
that
time flies, but
yeah, literally, yeah. Especially when you're doing a podcast about time travel
with a flying DeLorean.
That's appropriate.
Yeah.
But as always, we want to remind everybody to be sure and subscribe, like, and share to our YouTube channel. And when you do subscribe, just be sure you hit that little bell icon so that you're receiving all the notifications whenever new videos or content are posted. Also, don't forget about our socials. We're on all the major social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. So be sure and check those out as well. We'll have links for you on the bottom of your screen, and it's a good way for you to get in on the conversation too. We want to hear from you. What do you think of the podcast so far? What do you think of these episodes?
What could be improved upon it?
Exactly. We know you're watching. We know you're subscribing, because we're picking up new subscribers on practically a weekly basis now. But we want to hear from you. Just talk back to us. Engage.
Tell me what you want.
Yes. Marty. But yeah, it just, that we really want to hear from you, and we want to have that interaction, and just to that's just going to be helpful for us and where we can go from here. And you can also check out our Patreon page, which gives you an opportunity to have more of a direct hand in helping with the podcast, contributing, and everything you contribute, goes towards the podcast, goes towards, production costs and better equipment and hopefully like a permanent space and things like that, just to make the podcast the best that it can possibly be. So go on there and take a look at some of the perks that we're offering. Some pretty cool stuff on there, and just a way for you to to get involved and basically kind of be a producer almost is basically what your role would be. You would have a hand in producing the show. So there you go. But anyway, that's all the time we've got for today. But
what's the next episode? Our last episode. Our final episode.
The last episode of the season, and we are going to be closing out with what I think is a pretty good topic, going out on a high note. We're going to be talking about the series Tulsa King.
With Sylvester Stallone.
Yes, his first starring role in a fictional TV series.
Yeah.
So it's really great. It's from the producers of Yellowstone. So anyone who has watched that show or its spinoffs, it has that same sort of feel to it, and definitely the same sort of quality. But it's a terrific show, and so we're gonna be talking about that next week, and we certainly hope you'll join us for that. But in the meantime, as always, be good to yourselves, and we'll catch you next week.
I did it again? What?
You dipstick.